The morning sun had just begun to spill over the rooftops when I stepped out onto the porch with my coffee. The panels on my roof caught the light perfectly, silent, sleek, doing exactly what I built them to do. For the first time since retiring, I felt some peace in this quiet neighborhood. That peace lasted maybe 10 minutes. A white SUV with the HOA emblem stenciled on the side rolled to a stop in front of my driveway. I didn't need to see the name tag to know who it was. Mrs. Cranford, the self-appointed queen of Maple Ridge Estates. Clipboard in hand, sunglasses on even though the sun was barely awake. She stepped out with a smile that never reached her eyes. "Good morning, Mr. Hale," she called, voice sugary and sharp all at once. "Lovely morning, though I'm afraid we need to discuss those panels on your roof." I took another slow sip of coffee. "Something wrong with them?" "They're in violation," she said, glancing up at the panels like they'd personally offended her. Section 12, Subarticle D of our community's Visual Harmony Standards. Solar installations are required to be pre-approved by the HOA board. I let her words hang in the air for a moment, the kind of silence that makes people explain themselves. She did. "It's not personal," she added quickly, eyes flicking toward the houses across the street where blinds twitched. "We simply have rules here to maintain uniform appearance and property value. You understand?" I smiled a little. "Of course. I like rules when they're real. Which statute did you say this was under?" Her expression faltered, then hardened. "It's under our bylaws. The ones you agreed to when you purchased the property." "I read the bylaws," I said quietly. "Nothing about solar panels. Just vague talk about aesthetic continuity." That seemed to sting. She straightened her clipboard against her chest like a shield. "Regardless, you'll need to remove them. I can issue a citation today, or, if you prefer, we can handle it through enforcement. Your choice." Somewhere behind her, a neighbor whispered through a cracked window. "You don't argue with her. She always wins." I heard it, but I didn't look. I just watched the steam rise from my cup. "I'm not removing them," I said finally. "They were installed with county approval and meet all electrical and safety codes. If there's a real violation, you're welcome to show me the statute." She smiled again, tight and sharp. "We don't need to involve the county. This is an HOA matter." "Then you'll need to cite your own code properly," I replied. "Otherwise, you're not enforcing, just threatening." Her SUV engine idled behind her, low and restless, like it could sense the tension. She clicked her pen, the sound crisp in the morning quiet. "You're new here," she said softly. "You may not realize how we do things. We prefer to resolve matters quickly, without unnecessary conflict." "Conflict's not my goal," I said. "Compliance with actual law is." Her jaw tightened. I saw the faintest tremor of irritation ripple through her posture, the mask slipping just a little. She wasn't used to people staying calm. She was used to fear. "Fine," she said finally. "If you won't cooperate, my team will handle it. Consider this your final warning." She turned back toward her SUV, scribbling something on the clipboard as she went. The tires crackled against the gravel when she climbed in, pausing just long enough to lower her window. "You'll regret testing me, Mr. Hale," she said, voice losing all pretense of politeness. "I have authority to enforce compliance immediately." I didn't move. "Authority backed by what statute, exactly?" She didn't answer. The window rolled up, and the SUV hummed in place, exhaust curling like a faint gray ribbon. Across the street, a door closed quietly. Another neighbor. Watching. Recording maybe. The whole block felt like it was holding its breath. I set my coffee cup down on the porch railing, the ceramic clinking softly against the wood. My security camera light blinked red, steady and patient. Cranford revved the engine once before pulling away. "If you won't take them down," she called over the sound of the motor, "my team will." The SUV rolled off down the street, sunlight flashing across its hood. I watched until it turned the corner and vanished, the silence it left behind heavier than before. Then I looked up at the panels again, gleaming, efficient, and perfectly legal, and smiled. The camera's red light kept blinking, recording everything. The next day, the HOA office smelled like printer toner and overconfidence. Papers shuffled like cards in a game only one person thought she could win. Mrs. Cranford sat behind her wide oak desk, a portrait of herself from the last community gala smiling down approvingly from the wall. Her assistant, Jenny, hovered near the corner, tapping nervously at a keyboard as Cranford dictated another violation notice. "Make it official," Cranford said, her voice clipped and cold. "Temporary enforcement authority under Article 17, subsection. Oh, just put visual harmony. He'll fold once we hit his wallet." Jenny hesitated. "Should I double-check that article? I don't remember." Cranford cut her off with a raised hand. "Do as I say. He's just another stubborn retiree who thinks his little gadgets make him special. A few fines, and he'll beg to comply." Outside, the late afternoon light slanted through the blinds, casting striped shadows across stacks of complaint letters. The hum of the copier masked Jenny's sigh. "Start fining him daily," Cranford continued, signing with a flourish. $200 per day should make him sweat." Jenny looked up. "Do we have legal grounds?" Cranford leaned back in her chair, smiling that same tight, self-assured smile she'd worn on my porch. "He's an old man with toys on his roof. Trust me, he'll cave before he ever files a complaint." But I wasn't caving. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of reheated coffee and the HOA bylaws open on my screen. I'd spent years reading military manuals and engineering specs. This was child's play in comparison. I searched every mention of visual harmony, every amendment, every appendix. Nothing. The supposed rule Cranford had invoked didn't exist. Not ratified. Not filed. Not even proposed. Just a phrase she'd probably invented because it sounded official. I scrolled further, tracing signatures and timestamp. Each amendment required a 2/3 vote and county filing acknowledgement. The last one they'd filed was back in 2018, ironically, the same year the HOA's communal grid had failed inspection for unsafe power routing and incomplete grounding. I sat back, breathing slowly. The same hands writing fake fines were the ones that had ignored an actual safety failure years ago. Toys, she'd called them. I looked out the window at my panels, gleaming quietly against the sun. I'd wired every circuit myself, every connection clean and redundant. The entire system could power my home for days if the grid went out. And maybe, just maybe, it could tell me more about the HOA's sloppy setup. I began documenting everything, dates, letters, voice recordings. Every time her assistant called, I logged it. Every notice taped to my door, scanned and timestamped. I even mailed copies to myself, certified, unopened. The kind of paper trail that made bureaucrats sweat when the day came. That night, I noticed something odd. As I sat reading, the kitchen light flickered once, then steadied. The digital clock on the wall blinked twice before correcting itself. Just a second of disruption, but enough to make me look toward the power meter outside. I walked to the breaker panel in the garage, checking the readings. Normal. Voltage steady. But then, from down the street, I caught a glimpse of the HOA office lights dimming briefly, then returning to life. Coincidence, maybe. Or a reminder that power, real power, ran both ways. The next morning, I stopped by the community mailbox and found a bright orange envelope waiting. Immediate attention required. Inside, my first fine notice. $200. Due in 72 hours. I almost laughed. The letter cited visual harmony again, signed by Cranford herself. No statute, no date of ratification, nothing. Just her signature and the HOA letterhead, printed crookedly as if even the machine had second thoughts. By noon, I'd finished scanning it and adding it to my growing digital archive labeled Harassment Series. Jenny passed by my house that afternoon delivering more envelope. She didn't meet my eyes. Maybe she already knew this was going too far. When I returned inside, I opened my laptop again. The county's public database was slow, but it was thorough. I found what I was looking for buried under inspection records: a schematic diagram labeled Maple Ridge Communal Power Network. Outdated. Poorly grounded. Marked non-compliant. 2018 inspection failed in red letters across the top. My fingers lingered over the keyboard. Toys, huh? I murmured to myself. Let's test their wiring. The soft hum of my home power system filled the silence as I downloaded every document. On the screen, the HOA's grid layout pulsed faintly in blue lines, connecting every house and their office. The same office that had just flickered. I stared at the diagram, the gears already turning. They thought I was powerless, but I knew exactly where their power came from. The garage hummed like a heartbeat, quiet, steady, alive. I sat at my workbench, surrounded by soft blue lights from the monitoring screens. My old multimeter blinked lazily beside the soldering station, while thin copper wires ran like veins across the concrete floor. The air smelled faintly of metal and heat, the scent of control. It had taken me 2 days to confirm it, but the evidence was there. The HOA office's power line was piggybacking off my substation junction. Their office grid wasn't independent at all. It fed through an outdated line that crossed my property before merging back into the main network. In simple terms, they'd been stealing my power for years, probably without even realizing it. I smiled faintly. "You wanted to talk about violations, Mrs. Cranford," I murmured. "Let's see who's really out of compliance." Using my old engineering laptop, I mapped the data path. Each cable was color-coded on screen, a glowing artery of current. Then, I installed a few diagnostic sensors. No tampering, nothing illegal. Just silent listeners to log the HOA office's consumption from my line. If I was right, their energy draw would spike during office hours. Proof, recorded in digital ink. Outside, the crickets buzzed. A car passed, headlights sweeping briefly across the garage door before fading away. I tightened one last connection, checked the readings, and watched a new data stream appear on my laptop. Every watt they used would now quietly record itself to a hidden file named evidence_1. By morning, the neighborhood had caught wind of something. They always did. 2 women walking their dogs slowed as they passed my driveway. I heard the whispers. I wasn't meant to, but I did. "They say he's building some kind of generator army," one said. "Like solar weapons?" the other replied, half joking, half serious. "Who knows? People like that, veterans, they don't back down easy." I pretended not to hear, just waved politely as I coiled a cord. They smiled awkwardly and hurried on. Later that afternoon, a new letter appeared on my gate. Same HOA letterhead. Same smug font. This one was shorter, nastier. "Your panels remain in violation of visual harmony and community standard. Remove them immediately or face lien action and potential foreclosure proceedings." At the bottom, in looping blue ink, was Cranford's personal note. "Your toys are an eyesore. Some of us take pride in this neighborhood." I folded the letter neatly, slipped it into a plastic binder labeled evidence_2, and returned inside. If she wanted to play bureaucracy, I'd play chess. I spent the rest of the evening drafting a response. Not emotional, surgical. A formal cease and desist, citing County Statute 46-104, the same law protecting homeowners from unauthorized enforcement actions. I quoted it line by line, attached copies of their false notices, and included the time-stamped photos of every delivery. At the end, I added one quiet sentence. "All further attempts to collect unlawful fines or to interfere with county-approved infrastructure will be documented and forwarded to legal authorities." I printed 2 copies. One for Cranford, one for someone else. The someone else was the local county inspector who'd once overseen the failed 2018 inspection. I remembered his name, his signature on the report. I wondered if he remembered the neighborhood that had ignored his recommendations. The next morning, I mailed both letters. Certified. Tracked. Sealed with calm precision. That evening, as I checked the readings again, I noticed the HOA office's power usage spike. Massive compared to the residential average. Probably their AC running full blast while they printed more fines. The irony wasn't lost on me. Every minute they tried to punish me, they were literally burning my energy to do it. Around sunset, I heard the crunch of gravel, someone walking up my driveway. It was Tom, the neighbor from 2 houses down, the one who'd once borrowed my ladder. He stood at the edge of the driveway, cap in hand, eyes darting to my roof. "You're not scared?" he asked finally. "They're saying she's gonna make an example of you." I smiled faintly. "Fear wastes power, Tom. I conserve." He gave a nervous laugh, then left as quietly as he came. Not long after, my phone buzzed, a voicemail notification. Unknown number. The area code was county level. I put on my glasses, hit play. "Mr. Hale," the voice said, low and steady, the faint hum of an office behind it. "This is Inspector Carson. I received your letter and the evidence you sent. You were right, and you won't believe what else we found in their setup." The message ended with a click. The garage lights flickered once, the same subtle pulse as before. I stared at the screen for a long moment, the corner of my mouth lifting just slightly. Whatever they'd found, it was about to change everything. Midday sunlight poured down on Maple Ridge, sharp enough to make the asphalt shimmer. By the time the white county truck rolled into the cul-de-sac, half the neighborhood was already outside pretending to check their mail or sweep driveways. Phones were out, cameras ready, that curious mix of fear and fascination that always follows a confrontation. I stood on my porch, coffee in hand again, watching the county inspector step out of his vehicle. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and wore the calm expression of a man who'd seen this kind of petty war before. His badge glinted briefly as he adjusted his clipboard. Mrs. Cranford was already waiting, flanked by 2 board members who looked like nervous lieutenants. She straightened her blazer, smiled for the audience, and walked forward with the grace of someone convinced she was about to win. "Inspector Carson, thank you for coming," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "This matter concerns a violation of community standards and safety. We're protecting property values here." Carson nodded, not writing anything yet. "I understand, ma'am. You filed a complaint regarding unauthorized electrical installations." "Correct," she said crisply. "Mr. Hale's solar panels were never approved by our board, and they pose—" "Hold on," he interrupted gently. "Before we discuss aesthetics, I need to verify some technical data." He looked past her toward the HOA office at the end of the block. "That building there, who manages its power supply?" Cranford blinked. "Our office? The HOA does, obviously. We have our own independent service." "Independent," he repeated, tapping his pen against his clipboard. "Mind if I confirm that?" Her smile wavered just slightly. "Of course. We have nothing to hide." He walked toward the building, his equipment bag swinging at his side. A small cluster of neighbors followed at a distance, whispering. I stayed where I was, hands steady, watching the way Cranford's eyes darted to me every few seconds. She didn't like losing control of the narrative. Carson knelt beside the meter outside the HOA office, attaching a small device. It beeped twice, then displayed a line of readings. His brow furrowed. He looked back at me. Then again at Cranford. "Ma'am," he called out, "your office runs off his power line." The murmurs rippled instantly through the street. Cranford laughed, but it came out too sharp. "That's absurd. We have our own source. This must be a misreading." Carson's tone stayed calm. "No misreadings. The power junction behind his property feeds directly into this meter. It's drawing from Mr. Hale's grid connection." Her composure cracked. "He must have tampered with something. This is sabotage." The crowd gasped. Some phones zoomed in on her face. Someone whispered, "She's panicking." I set down my mug and walked slowly toward them. "Sabotage," I said quietly. "You've been tapping into my power line for years. I just recorded it. You've been paying your bills with my current. Cranford turned, voice rising. You think you can stand there and accuse me of theft? You installed those panels illegally. Carson held up a hand. Actually, Mrs. Cranford, the county approved his installation 2 months ago. All permits cleared. She froze. The color drained from her face. The inspector stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough to make her strain to hear. You've been drawing unmetered power from a non-compliant line since 2018. That's not a paperwork error, that's theft of service. The street went silent. Even the breeze seemed to stop moving. Cranford's mouth opened, then closed again. Her board members shuffled backward like soldiers abandoning a lost general. The inspector turned to me. Mr. Hale, he said evenly, you mentioned you've been monitoring this connection? I nodded. Every what since last week. Logged and time-stamped. She snapped. You can't prove. Carson raised a hand again. Ma'am, I think you've done enough talking. The neighbors began recording openly now, no longer pretending to check their mail. One of them muttered, he's got her cornered. Another said, wait, what does he mean, it's on his line? I looked at her, then at the inspector. If her office runs off my system, I said, then she won't mind when I disconnect mine. That got everyone's attention. Even Carson paused, the faintest smirk tugging at the edge of his mouth. The crowd leaned in, phones held high. The air felt charged, a live current of anticipation humming between every house on the block. Cranford's voice broke through the tension. You wouldn't dare. I smiled just slightly. You've mistaken calm for fear. For a moment, no one breathed. Then Carson exhaled and raised an eyebrow. Go ahead, Mr. Hale, he said, his voice quiet but carrying. Let's see what happens when you pull the plug. The afternoon heat sat heavy over Maple Ridge. The asphalt shimmered like glass, and the crowd from earlier had doubled in size. Neighbors stood in clusters, fanning themselves with envelopes, whispering and watching. Every phone in sight was up and recording, eyes of the digital age, hungry for justice or drama or both. The HOA parking lot looked like a stage now, and Cranford was right at the center, pacing with her clipboard clutched like a lifeline. Her confidence was cracking. You could see it in the way her words stuttered when she barked orders to her assistants, who pretended to take notes but couldn't look her in the eye. I stood near the utility junction at the edge of the lot. My toolbox lay open beside me, every motion deliberate. The inspector stood a few feet away, arms crossed, eyes watchful but calm, like a teacher letting a lesson play out. Mr. Hale, he said, voice steady, you're certain this is your connection? I nodded, showing him the paperwork, county seals and all. Every inch of it. Certified, documented, and paid for by me. Cranford scoffed loudly. This is ridiculous. You can't just... Carson cut her off gently. You said your office power source is independent, correct? Yes, of course, she snapped. The HOA doesn't rely on anyone else's infrastructure. We're fully compliant. He tilted his head slightly. Then this shouldn't affect you at all. I looked up at the small crowd, some whispering, others holding their breath. You might want to step back, I said quietly. Just in case. Then I turned the main breaker handle. There was a sharp metallic click. The hum of electricity in the air faded, like someone pulling the sound out of the world. For half a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, pop. The HOA office lights flickered, blinked, and went dark. The low rumble of the air conditioning units sputtered to a stop. Inside, computers went silent, screens freezing mid-spreadsheet. The sound of distant fans winding down filled the hot stillness. Gasps rippled through the street. Cranford spun toward the building, disbelief painted across her face. No, this is tampering, she shrieked, voice cracking. He's sabotaging community property. Carson didn't move. Actually, ma'am, you just confirmed his ownership of your supply line. The crowd erupted in murmurs. Someone near the front whispered, she's done. Another said, he really pulled the plug on her. Cranford stormed toward me, finger shaking. Turn it back on or I'll. I raised my head slightly, still calm. You'll what? Cite me again? She froze mid-step, caught between fury and fear. Her assistants backed away from her, pretending to busy themselves with their phones. Carson unfolded a document from his folder. Mrs. Cranford, he said evenly, I'm documenting this as an active theft of utility services under County Code 14.32. That's a criminal offense. I suggest you stop talking. The color drained from her face completely. The crowd was silent now except for the soft hum of recording phones. I could see my reflection in one of them, calm, still, not triumphant, just done. I checked my watch. 3:17 p.m. The office had been running on my current for years. Now, without it, it was just a dead box of drywall and denial. Cranford stumbled backward, trying to salvage her dignity. This is a misunderstanding, she said, voice trembling. We'll contact our legal team. Carson looked up from his clipboard. I'll be contacting the county prosecutor first. She blinked rapidly, words failing her. Then she looked at me like she finally understood, not what I'd done, but how patient I'd been before doing it. Phones lifted higher. The sun caught the edge of her clipboard, turning it into a dull flash of light, like a warning signal. Ma'am, the inspector said softly, it's over. Cranford's mouth opened again, but no sound came. Her face twitched, rage, humiliation, disbelief, and then she turned away, shoulders shaking. For a moment, the whole street was quiet except for the rhythmic click of my cooling solar array. Then, in the distance, the sound of sirens began to rise, faint at first, then growing louder. Blue and red lights flickered across the far end of the street. The crowd parted as a white van rolled closer, cameras mounted on the roof. Channel 4 local news emblazoned across the side. Someone in the crowd whispered, half in awe, half in glee, "Oh, this is going viral." The van stopped beside the inspector's truck. A reporter jumped out, mic in hand, eyes scanning the scene before landing on me. "Sir," she called, microphone raised, voice clear over the hum of whispers, "did you really just shut down the HOA?" I didn't answer right away. I just looked at the dead building, then at Cranford, then back at the reporter. The sun beat down. The cameras rolled. The silence stretched. Then I smiled, small, calm, unbothered. And for the first time all day, Cranford looked genuinely afraid. By sunset, Maple Ridge didn't look like the same street. The golden light hit every window like a slow confession, and the quiet hum of the news van filled the air where shouting used to be. Reporters had gathered along the curb, cameras rolling, voices steady and professional as they summarized the spectacle that had unfolded just hours ago. Breaking this evening. The Maple Ridge HOA faces multiple charges, including misuse of funds and unauthorized electrical rerouting. One anchor said into the mic, officials confirmed the HOA office had been illegally siphoning electricity from a private homeowner's grid, a discovery made after a dramatic on-site inspection earlier today. Behind her, the blacked-out HOA building sat in silence. The proud blue and gold sign that once declared Maple Ridge Estates HOA, "Your community, our priority," now hung dull and lifeless, half the letters flickering weakly. Mrs. Cranford was gone, escorted out earlier by county officers, her clipboard confiscated. Her assistant, Jenny, had followed soon after, not under arrest but with shaking hands and a pale face. She'd turned in her keys and muttered, "I didn't know, I swear," before disappearing into her car. The crowd that had once feared Cranford now whispered a different tone. Apologies. Admiration. Relief. Tom, the neighbor who'd asked if I was scared, approached with his wife beside him. She held a plastic container wrapped in foil. "My wife made cookies," he said, voice low, awkward. "We figured we owed you something, you know, after doubting you." I smiled. "You don't owe me anything. Just read your HOA papers next time." He chuckled nervously, then glanced toward the dead office. "Guess we picked the wrong side." The county inspector, Carson, stepped up beside me, clipboard still in hand but his tone lighter now. "You've done half my job for me, Mr. Hale," he said. "All the evidence checks out. Logs, video, even those diagnostics you installed. The county's filing restitution orders first thing tomorrow. You'll get reimbursed for the power they stole." I raised an eyebrow. "Reimbursed? With what?" "HOA bake sale money." He grinned. "State funds, actually. The county's freezing their assets until the investigation wraps up." "Fair enough," I said. A reporter from Channel 4 approached cautiously, microphone raised, her face framed by the warm orange of the setting sun. The crowd went silent again. "Mr. Hale," she began, "viewers are calling this the solar standoff. What message would you give to others facing this kind of abuse from their HOA?" I looked at her, then at the camera. The lens reflected my own tired face, streaked with sunlight and shadow. "Patience isn't weakness," I said quietly. "It's precision." The reporter nodded, lowering the mic. The cameraman gave me a small, respectful smile before they turned back toward their van. Carson watched them go, then glanced at me. "You didn't just cut the power," he said. "You restored balance." For the first time in days, I exhaled without tension sitting on my chest. The golden light began to fade into the cool blue of evening. Carson handed me a paper to sign, authorization to reconnect the power under county supervision. "Just a formality," he said. "But I figured it'd feel right if you were the one to flip it back on." I nodded and walked toward the breaker panel. The metal handle felt warm under my fingers. I eased it upward, and with a low hum, the current surged back through the lines. The HOA sign flickered once, twice, then glowed dimly. Not bright, not proud, just enough to prove it was still standing, now under county control. Neighbors clapped softly. Not cheering, just a quiet show of respect. Cranford's SUV was still parked at the far end of the street, abandoned for now. The setting sun caught its rear window, throwing a brief shimmer of red light across my driveway, like the last echo of arrogance fading into dusk. I lingered for a moment, hands resting on the gate, feeling the air cool as the cicadas began their evening chorus. For the first time since moving here, I didn't feel like an outsider. Then I turned toward my house, ready to call it a night. Just as I reached the porch, something hit the metal of my mailbox with a hollow thunk. I opened it to find a thick envelope, heavy paper, county seal pressed into the corner. The label read, "New County Ordinance Proposal, Solar Installations Review Board." I turned it over in my hands, a faint smile tugging at my lips. Somewhere, someone had finally learned the right lesson from all this. The street lights flickered on around me, one by one, their soft glow returning order to the night. I closed my gate with a quiet click and whispered to myself, "Power restored."